So in my previous episode, we looked at how to onboard, on-premises service deployed on Azure Stack HCI. We saw a couple of virtual machines that are deployed on Azure Stack HCI clusters, and we also saw an Ubuntu virtual machine which was actually deployed on Google Cloud Platform, and we saw how to onboard those, servers which actually lived outside of Azure using Azure Arc. We discussed about two different methods to onboard each of these servers. One method is, just onboard one at a time, or what would you do when you have a huge estate of servers that live outside of Azure, probably using something known as the Azure Arc service principles, right? So in this episode, now that we have onboarded these servers into Azure, now let's see what we can do with those servers. Hello and welcome back, and thanks again for tuning into Jayant on Cloud. Thank you for all the subscriptions, comments and feedbacks, and great to hear that you guys are enjoying this series on Jayant on Cloud. Again, if you have not subscribed already, please hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified as and when I upload new videos. Now, my name is Jayant. Just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Jayant. I work as a senior principal engineering technologist at Dell Technologies. And in this episode, we're going to look at, once that, in the previous episode, we've onboarded some of the servers that actually lived outside of Azure. And in this episode, let's explore all the possibilities that Azure offers you today, that you can explore and see what you can do with those servers, which are actually, now that they're onboarded into Azure. All right, so now here I am in Windows Admin Center. So what I've done is I've actually went ahead and spun up one more virtual machine, just to kind of give you guys an experience of what it takes to really, once it's onboarded, what do you do with it, right? So there are a few virtual machines which is already onboarded, and I've already went ahead and explored various options that Azure Arc offers you today. So that's why I've actually created one more virtual machine, and see, just to give you guys an idea of what it takes to actually exercise those options into a new virtual machine which is recently onboarded. Okay, so let's jump into Azure. As you can see, I'm the Azure portal. So let's go to Azure Arc. Right, so let's go to servers. Okay. Now, so these are the servers which are already onboarded. Now, Azure Stack HCI 1 and 2 are part of the clusters, so it has a tight integration with Azure. Azure Stack HCI is a service. It's an operating system that's delivered as an Azure service, so it's automatically onboarded to Azure. So it's showing up as a resource under Azure Arc. This is a GCP Ubuntu virtual machine, and these two are the virtual machines which we created in Windows Admin Center here. Okay, the Windows Server 2019 and the Windows Server 2022. Okay, now there is the new virtual machine which I created, which is W2K19 new, which is just this one. Okay, let's say it's new. All right. So now, if I click on this. Here, and let's click on Windows Server 2019 new. Okay, now you can see, like we saw in the previous episode, right? It gives you all the Azure constructs that you normally associate with an Azure virtual machine. Okay, so you have the activity logs, the access control policy is so powerful, isn't it? Especially if customers are really concerned about security and you want to be able to give customized permissions to your organization, your employees in your organization. So you can assign using access control policies using Azure AD, which is actually tied into your on-premises AD. So you can pretty much govern these resources or give access in terms of what privileges these administrators can actually exercise. So very powerful way for IT administrators to really monitor and manage these resources from a security standpoint as well. Okay, so we explored different tagging methodology. In fact, this server is already tagged. So when I clicked on onboard, I selected where what kind of tagging that needs to be mentioned on these servers. So in this particular case, it's called lab name Azure Arc server, so it's already tagged in. Okay. So like I said, there are so many options that are here. So if I go into overview, so it gives me a bunch of options, like, update management, logs, monitoring agents. One of the first steps that you really want to do is, you want to basically get the inventory of the system so that, you understand what is actually, Azure Arc can actually get an understanding of what's running on this system. Basically, it can do an inventory, it can, project out some of the, configuration parameters and data, which is logs and so on, into Azure Arc, so that Azure Arc can seamlessly monitor. So one of the first steps that you really want to do is, enable monitoring insights. Okay, so if I click on enable monitoring insights, if I click on enable, so it starts deploying a monitoring agent into that particular server. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, so one of the prerequisites of deploying insights or a monitoring agent is that you need to create a log analytics workspace. Okay, so in this case, I've already created a log analytics workspace. Okay, so which is LAW stands for log analytics workspace. So maybe I can just quickly show you how to create these things, right? So this is very important. So two important parameters that you need to keep in mind as part of the lifecycle management of virtual machines that actually live outside of Azure, right? So we're going to explore what are the different lifecycle management options that are available. But if you really want to exercise these options, there are prerequisites to be met, which means you need to create an automation account, which you're going to see. Also, you need to create a log analytics workspace. Okay, so both of which I quickly kind of go through what these things are. So if I go into homepage of Azure and click on log analytics workspace, so there you go. Okay, so you just go create a log, for instance, that's what the log analytic workspace that we saw is already created here. But if you have to create, you just have to create a log analytics workspace. Like create and put the subscription that you want to that you want this log analytic workspace to belong to, and the resource group, and so on and so forth. Right? So you just go ahead and create it. So what does it do? Basically, it's a space where the virtual machines can actually ship the logs, and the agents like the Azure Monitor can actually analyze those logs and give you insights, right? So that's the whole purpose of using these monitoring insights using Azure for the virtual machines that are living outside of Azure. Okay. So the other thing that you need to create is the automation account. So automation account is basically used for doing lifecycle management. For example, you want to do update management, or you want to do inventory tracking, or you want to do change tracking, for instance, right? What has changed? What is the different versions of the software, and who changed it? And all of that information can be tracked. So for that, you have to have an automation account, right? So same thing. You just go you just go to Azure portal and say search for automation accounts, and then you create an automation account. So when you just click, in fact, the automation account is already created here. Okay, so you specify the resource group that you want to belong to, that automation account, and you put the name for the automation account, and so on and so forth, right? So all that information is available. It's pretty straightforward, seamless. I don't want to kind of go through each step that is involved, but prerequisites are very, very important. Okay, so let's go back now. and go for Azure Arc for Servers. Now that we have enabled, monitoring agent, so let's see what's happening. Status of that. All right, so let's go to servers. Okay, so let's click on Windows Server 2019. So usually for deploying the monitoring insights, it actually goes and deploys, Azure monitoring agent inside that virtual machine, right? So maybe we can take a look at it real quick. So if I click on insights today, so if I click on monitoring insights, see, as you can see, it has not gone and deployed, or the data is still not available. So it does take a while, right? So what we can do is probably go to another virtual machine let's go. Let's do this. Alright, so this is a Windows Server 2019, which already has a monitoring agent deployed. So let's log into this virtual machine. Okay. Alright. So I'm logging into this VM, which is already onboarded, and also the monitoring insights and monitoring agents are already deployed. Okay, I installed. So let's go check it out. Control panel. Let's wait for it to come up. Okay, so let's go to. So as you can see here, there is a Microsoft monitoring agent which is deployed, and also deploys corresponding dependency agents that are required as well. Okay, so the first agent that you see is, as soon as the server is onboarded, you have the Azure Connected Machine agent that gets deployed, which we saw in the previous episode. But the moment you enable monitoring insights, just the way that we did, it goes and deploys these two agents, the Microsoft monitoring agent and also the dependency agent. So which we can also see here. In fact, if I go into, this is a server which is already on, where the monitoring agents insights is already enabled. So maybe I can go into configuration. Sorry, not the configuration. Let's go to inventory. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry about that. So let's go to extensions. So that's where it actually shows you these agents. So as you can see here, the Microsoft monitoring agent and the dependency agents are deployed on this particular server. But if I go into, let's say, this new server, which is yet to deploy. So if I go into extension, so as you can see, it's not deployed yet. Okay, so it takes a while before it deploys. All right, so this is the first thing that you want to do. So basically, when you as soon as you're on board, you want to make sure that monitoring insights is enabled. Okay, the other thing is that you can do with this is security. In fact, security is not enabled because that's something that you need to pay. So I don't have so many Azure credits to enable security on the subscription, but that's something that you can enable as well. So that's one of the so Azure Security Centers now has been renamed as Microsoft Defender for Cloud, right? So just to keep that in mind. So you can enable that. All right. So let's look at other options then. All right. So like I said, the lifecycle management, which is basically the update management, so where it has the ability to go push updates like security updates or Windows updates and so on and so forth, you can do that as well. So for that, the prerequisite is it needs to have an automation account, which we just saw, right? The change tracking and inventory, same thing. The other very powerful thing out of this is the policies, where you can actually seamlessly govern all of your resources, irrespective of where they reside, using Azure policies. Okay, so this is where it gets really, really powerful. Now, if I quickly go into Azure policies, so probably Go to Azure policy. Okay. Okay. Let's click on Azure policies. Okay. So this is where it already shows me the systems that are actually already being governed by these policies. So I have as many as so many virtual machines. For example, so this is the policy that I actually created additionally, which is called audit virtual machines with insecure password security. Okay, so let's look at, if you look at some of the things, right? So under this policy, I can look at some of the non-compliant resources. Okay, so like I said, so if I go into Azure Arc, it also already shows me there are 6 resources, which is actually being managed using Azure Arc, right? And out of those 6 resources, it shows me that about 5 resources are not compliant for insecure password security setting. Okay, so which means all of these virtual machines now are have a insecure password string. Okay, see how powerful it is, right? So as an IT administrator, it is so easier to manage these, this huge estate of IT estate with which they have. Like I said, it could, these IT resources live outside of Azure, but yet you can manage and monitor all of this for some of the governance that your company mandates. So from an IT administrator perspective, it becomes so powerful and easy to manage and govern these resources. So one of the reasons why probably you're not seeing a GCP Ubuntu here is because all of these virtual machines which I created, I gave a very, very simple password string, right? Now probably I'll show you why GCP, Ubuntu machine that is deployed on GCP is actually not showing up here. One of the reasons is, so this is a virtual machine. So if I go into Google, so I'm in Google Cloud right now. If I go into compute engines and click on virtual instances, then click on GCP Ubuntu. So it gives me the properties of this virtual machine. If I scroll down a little bit, going down, you see this. So basically an SSH key, I've generated an SSH key using partition. Okay, so using the partition, I've created this SSH key. So as you can see, it's as complex as it gets. So that's one of the reasons why the Ubuntu GCP is not showing up here. Now, a lot of customers ask me this question, right? You say I can just propagate the resources that actually are outside of Azure into Azure using Azure Arc, but the problem is I have to use Microsoft defined policies. Not really, right? You can have your own custom policies defined as well. So that is that's a real power of managing these resources, which means you can have your custom policies, which kind of aligns to your organizational governance and policy structure. So you can create those custom policies. For instance, as an organization, you may have zeroed in on a particular version of the antivirus software, or as an organization, you may have standardized on a particular port to be opened, right? As always for all the virtual machines. So you can pretty much group all those policies in a single policy definition. So if I go into policies here, I'll show how that is done. So if I go into policies here, Azure policies, there are something known as authoring policies, which means you can create a definition, assignments in it. So when I create definitions, right? So let's go to definitions here. And so it's come up. So as you can see, there are inbuilt policies that are already available from Microsoft Azure. That's why it says type is built in. However, what I've done is I've gone ahead and created a custom policy called JAY policy. Now I can apply these policies to the virtual machine. So I don't have to really just use the inbuilt policies alone. right, I can also use custom policies and assign this custom policies to all my virtual machines that reside outside of Azure. Okay, so powerful, isn't it? So again, like I said, many customers are apprehensive about this, but not really, right? So you can define your own custom policies and you can assign that custom policy to your resources that actually are outside of Azure as well. Okay, so now going back to Azure Arc. So let's go to servers. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about is, let's look at Windows Server 2019. Okay. Now, so the other things that you can do here is, we looked at policies, we looked at monitoring insights, we looked at security. The other two things are basically the update management and change tracking. So the ability to push, Windows updates or security updates seamlessly into these virtual machines, right? So you can't do it from here. So the best way to do it is, go into automation accounts, which we'll do right now. Okay, so go to automation account, and you see there's an automation account which I've already created, which is associated with the particular log analytics workspace. And if I click on update management, right? So let's click on that. All right. So now, so basically using the monitoring insights, it has already pumped the data to log analytics workspace, saying what are the different versions of the software that's installed. All of that information is available. As you can see, there are currently 4 systems are being monitored. Okay. Now you can add additional machines as well using managed machines and add those machines which are not part of the governance. So as you can see, there are 3 systems which are non-compliant, right? It has missing updates. So if I look into those missing updates, it says there are a number of security updates that are missing, which are Microsoft security updates, Windows security updates, right? And other things as well. See, this is really the power of it, right? So you can do that. Or if you want to really push these updates, you can schedule an update deployment, right? Update deployment, basically, it's kind of a maintenance window in which you go deploy the security updates on these virtual machines. So it can be completely scheduled and an automated process. All right. So the other thing that we will look into is, we looked at update management inventory. So I can get an inventory of what is installed on these servers, right? What is the version of the software that's currently running? What are the different services that are running on this particular virtual machine, right? All of that information can be retrieved using the option known as inventory. Okay, so let's wait for it to come up. These things do take it. Okay, all right. So as you can see, these are the 4 virtual machines which are being managed and monitored using Azure Arc. So I can get what are the different software that is installed, listed, depending on the machine that it is, right? So all that information is available, right? Windows registry, those services that are running on these systems. So I can go into each of these systems individually as well. I don't have to. So from an automation account perspective, it gives me a holistic view of all the servers that are being managed by the automation account. But if I want to, I can go into individual servers and do the inventory as well. For instance, if I go into servers and go into Windows Server 2019 and go, let's say, inventory. Okay, so let's wait for it to load. All right, so it shows me, right? So okay, it shows me the difference. See, we saw dependency agent that's installed. We just saw in that when we actually remote desktop into that particular virtual machine, we saw these agents were actually installed. The Azure Connected Machine agent. See, it shows all the software that is actually installed on this virtual machine. Different files that are there, Windows service, different various Windows services that are running, what is what is running and what is not running, and all of that information. So change tracking, for example, if I, as an IT organization, as an IT administrator, I want to track the changes that are being made to the system, right? I can track all of that right here as well, right? So you see how powerful it is for IT administrators to really govern and manage, not only just govern and manage, but also do lifecycle management like we saw using the update management workflow to the resources that actually live outside of Azure using Azure Arc. Okay, so let's come back to this virtual machine and check if the monitoring monitoring agent has been deployed. So let's click on monitoring agent. So as you can see, I'm presented with the monitoring data that's available. If I go into performance, okay, so yep, it shows me the disk performance here. It shows me the CPU utilization. It shows me the available memory, the IOPS information. All of that information is available right here. Okay. Now the beauty is, if I go into Azure Monitor, so it's good. Azure Monitor is going to give me a holistic view of all the resources that are under that particular log analytic workspace, right? So if you see here, right, in fact, each one of these legends, as you can see, is a different virtual machine, right? So it says, so I know it's pretty small. It says W2K19 new. The other one is 2019, which is already been, which is an old server which is already residing there. There's one more server that says GCP Ubuntu, right? So all of these, as you can see from a holistic view, I get pretty much from a single console using Azure Monitor. Okay, so like you saw, in this episode, we looked at what are the various options that are available. We looked at how to go deploy the Azure monitoring agent, and once the Azure monitoring agent is created, how to create an automation account, how to create a log analytics workspace. And not just that, we also looked at the various options, the lifecycle management options for the virtual machines or the resources that actually lived outside of Azure, like for instance, update management, the inventory tracking, and change tracking. All those options we also looked at. And last but not the least, we looked at the Azure Monitor and see how to monitor all of these resources from using Azure Monitor, that is tied to a particular log analytics workspace, and see get a holistic view of all the resources that actually lived outside of Azure. All right, so with that, I have come to the end of this episode. In my next episode, probably we'll explore the other options that are available under Azure Arc Infrastructure Services. So until then, stay tuned and stay safe.